You must have warmer colors. There is far too much white and that cold gray color used. They never look well in large bodies and are dreary in wet weather and glaring in fine weather. Imitate rather the rich browns and olive greens found in nature. The frame house could be made more joyous to look upon with the air of the carver. Every child should be taught wood carving, and I recommend the establishment in this city of a school of design for the sole purpose of teaching wood carving. Even the poor Swiss shepherd boy spends his leisure time doing beautiful carving instead of reading detestable novels. Americans might carve as well, and I am sadly disappointed that you do not develop this art more. All ornaments should be carved, and have no cast iron ornaments, nor any of those ugly things made by machinery. You should not have cast iron railings fixed outside the house, which boys are always knocking down, and very rightly too, for they always look cheap and shabby. If possible, have beaten ironwork. Of all the metal works in this country, so far as it relates to cast iron, it is a shame that none are nobly or beautifully wrought, like the beaten globes of even the poorest Italian cities. The old iron ornaments of Verona, that were worked by hand out of the noble metal into beautiful figures, are as beautiful and strong now as when wrought 300 or 400 years ago by artistic handicraftsmen. Finally, your black-leaded knocker should give way to a bright brass one. Within the house, the hall should not be papered. Since the walls are exposed more or less to the elements by the frequent opening and closing of the door, it could be wainscoted with some of America's beautiful woods, such as the maple, or distempered with ordinary paint. Wainscoting makes the house warm. It is easily done by any carpenter, and it will admit of fine work in panel painting, which is a style of decoration most desirable, and one that is growing greatly in favor. Don't carpet the floor. Ordinary red brick tiles make a warm and beautiful floor, and I prefer it to the geometrically arranged tiles of the present day. There should be no pictures in the hall, for it is no place for a good picture, and a poor one should be put nowhere. It is a mere passageway, except in stately mansions, and no picture should be placed where you have not time to sit down and reverence and admire and study it. Hat racks are, I suppose, necessary. I have never seen a really nice hat rack. The ordinary one is more like some horrible instrument of torture than anything useful or graceful, and it is perhaps the ugliest thing in the house. A large painted oak chest is the best stand for cloaks. For hats, a pretty rack in wood to hang on the wall in light wood or bamboo would be best. A few large chairs would complete the furniture in the hallway. Have none of those gloomy horrors, stuffed animals or stuffed birds in the hall or anywhere else under glass cases. Plain marble tables, such as I have seen in America, in such number should not be tolerated unless the marble is beautifully inlaid and the wood carved. As regards rooms generally, in America, the great fault in decoration is the entire want of harmony or a definite scheme in color. There is generally a collection of a great many things, individually pretty, but which do not combine to make a harmonious whole. Colors resemble musical notes. A single false color or false note destroys the whole. Therefore, in decorating a room, one keynote of color should predominate. It must be decided beforehand what scheme of color is desired and have all else adapted to it, like the answering calls in a symphony of music. Otherwise, your room will be a museum of colors. With regard to choice of color, the disciples of the new school of decorative art are said to be very fond of gloomy colors. Well, we set great value on toned or secondary colors, because all decoration means gradually ascending colors, while bright colors should be kept for ornament. On the walls, secondary colors should be used, and the ceiling should never be painted in bright colors. The best Eastern embroidery, for instance, is filled with light colors. Start with a low tone as the keynote, and then you get the real value of primary colors by having little bits of color, beautiful embroidery, and artwork set like precious gems in the more somber colors. If you have the whole room and things generally in bright colors, the capabilities of the room are exhausted for all other color effects, and you would have to have fireworks for ornaments to set it off. All depends upon the graduation of color. Look at the rose and see how all its beauty depends on its exquisite gradations of color, one answering the other. Mr. Whistler has recently done 2 rooms in London which are marvels of beauty. One is the famous Peacock Room, which I regard as the finest thing in color and art decoration that the world has ever known since Correggio painted that wonderful room in Italy where the little children are dancing on the walls. Everything is of the colors in peacock's feathers, and each part so colored with regard to the whole that the room, when lighted up, seems like a great peacock tail spread out. It cost £3,000, I think. Mr. Whistler finished the other room just before I came away. A breakfast room in blue and yellow and costing only £30. The walls are distempered in blue. The ceiling is a light and warm yellow. The flower is laid with a richly painted matting in light yellow, with a light line or leaf here and there of blue. The woodwork is all cane yellow, and the shelves are filled with blue and white china. The curtains of white serge have a yellow border tastefully worked in, and hang in careless but graceful folds. When the breakfast table is laid in this apartment, with its light cloth and its dainty blue and white china, with a cluster of red and yellow chrysanthemums in an old Nankin vase at the center, it is a charming room, catching all the warm light, and taking on all surrounding beauty, and giving to the guest a sense of joyousness, comfort, and rest. Nothing could be simpler. It costs little, and it shows what a great effect might be realized with a little and simple color. A designer must imagine in color, must think in color, must see in color. Your workmen should be taught to work more freely in colors, and this can only be done by accustoming them to beautiful ones. Even in imaginative art, predominance must now be given to color. A picture is primarily a flat surface colored to produce a delightful effect upon the beholder, and if it fails of that, it is surely a bad picture. The aim of all art is simply to make life more joyous. You should have such men as Whistler among you, to teach you the beauty and joy of color. When he paints a picture, he paints by reference, not to the subject, which is merely intellectual, but to color. I was speaking to Mr. Whistler once, before a great critic, of what could be done with one color. The critic chose white as the color offering fewest tones. Mr. Whistler painted his beautiful symphony in white, which you no doubt have imagined to be something quite bizarre. It is nothing of the sort. Think of a cool gray sky with white clouds, a gray sea flecked with the crests of white capped waves, a gray balcony on which are two little girls clad in pure white leaning over the railing. An almond tree covered in white blossoms is by the side of the balcony, from which one of the girls is idly plucking with white hands the petals which flutter across the picture. Such pictures as this one are of infinitely more value than horrible pictures of historical scenes. Here are no extensive intellectual schemes to trouble you, and no metaphysics, of which we have had quite enough in art. If the simple and unaided color strikes the right keynote, the whole conception is made clear. I doubt not that our aesthetic movement has given to the world an increased sense of the value of color, and that in time a new science of the art of dealing in color will be evolved. But to return to our room, if there is much or heavy furniture, the design on the wall should be rich. If the furniture is limited or light, the design should be light and simple. The walls cannot often in this country be hung with tapestry, therefore they should be papered. However, do not use white and gold paper. Divide the wall into two uneven parts, either with a dado and paper it to the cornice, or with a frieze and paper from it downwards. I do not advise the use of both unless the walls are very high. You will want a joyous paper on the wall, full of flowers and pleasing designs, but the dado should not be of paper, but either of woods or some of the beautiful Japanese mattings which come to this country, so as to carry out the principles of utility, that is, to protect the lower and more exposed part of the wall from being scratched or marred by the furniture coming in contact with it. Nor should the frieze be of paper, it should be painted, and the remainder of the wall papered.